Devon's moors and seaside towns hold eerie secrets. From haunted inns and ancient churches to ghostly halls and ruins, these 12 haunted places still echo with whispers from the past. Totnes Castle, high above the winding streets of Totnes, stands its ancient Norman fortress, Totnes Castle. Built nearly 1,000 years ago, it has watched over the River Dart since the days when knights rode through its gates and villagers whispered of omens on the moor. Beneath its thick stone walls, the air feels colder, heavier, as if the earth itself remembers. Visitors often pause midway up the spiral steps, struck by the sudden sense that someone is climbing just behind them. When they turn, the stairway is empty. For generations, locals have spoken of voices echoing across the inner courtyard at dusk, faint, desperate cries that seem to rise from the soil itself. Some claim these are the ghosts of prisoners once held here. Others say they are echoes of soldiers slain in battle when the castle was besieged during the civil wars of the 17th century. A former caretaker told of locking the gate one winter night and hearing a woman sobbing softly within the keep. He unlocked the door and searched every chamber, yet found nothing but the flutter of bats and the smell of damp stone. There is also talk of a shadowy figure that stands upon the ramparts when the town clock strikes midnight. Described as tall and cloaked, it stares toward the river before fading into the mist. Some believe this is the spirit of a Norman sentry still keeping his endless watch. Even during the day, the castle feels uneasy. Guides have reported sudden gusts that slam doors, and visitors have captured strange orbs of light drifting across their photographs, pale shapes that seem almost human. Those who linger after sunset say the castle hums with unseen life whispers carried on the wind, footsteps circling the battlements, and a single mournful cry that drifts down into the sleeping town. Totnes Castle remains a proud monument to Devon's history, but for those who walk its walls after dark, it is also a place where the past has never truly died. Bay Horse Inn. In the narrow lanes of Totnes stands the Bay Horse Inn, a modest old pub with a timbered frame, low ceilings, and stories that refuse to fade. Beneath its quiet laughter and clinking glasses lies a history that chills even the most skeptical visitor. The inn dates back centuries, its foundations older than many of the streets around it. The air inside carries the scent of wood smoke, and something older still, the faint must of age and memory. Locals say that after closing time, when the lights are dimmed and the last guest has gone, the building wakes again. Staff have spoken of footsteps pacing overhead when every room above was locked. Others have heard the dragging of barrels in the alleyway, though no one was there. A cleaner once swore that beer mats she had stacked neatly on the bar were found the next morning, arranged in a perfect circle, as if placed by careful unseen hands. The apparition most often seen is that of a small elderly man in a red coat. He appears near the hearth, his face pale, his eyes unfocused, as though looking into another time. Some believe he was once a sailor who lodged here and never left. Others think he may be a former landlord keeping watch over his ale. Guests who stay the night sometimes awaken to find a faint figure standing by their bed, a man in a straw hat who fades before they can speak. One visitor described the smell of tobacco filling the room, then hearing laughter, gentle but mocking, echoing from the corridor. Even skeptics admit the inn has a presence, a heaviness that settles after dark when the old timbers creak and the wind brushes the windows like searching fingers. The Bay Horse Inn is loved by locals for its warmth and history, but those who linger too long in its empty bar after midnight say they can feel eyes upon them, unseen, patient, and far older than the town itself. Church of St. Mary. Rising above the old streets of Totnes, the Church of St. Mary seems peaceful by day. Sunlight pours through stained glass onto worn pews, and the air smells faintly of incense and damp stone. Yet when evening falls and the bells fall silent, this ancient church becomes a place of whispers and uneasy stillness. Built in the 15th century, the church has witnessed wars, plagues, and generations of worshippers. Its graveyard slopes gently toward the river, its crooked stones leaning like watchers. Locals say that after dusk, a pale mist gathers there, drifting low among the tombs. Within it walks the Grey Lady, a tall woman in a faded Elizabethan gown, her face hidden by a lace veil. No one knows her name. Some believe she was the widow of a sea captain, lost to the tides, doomed to wait by the church where they once wed. Others claim she was a healer, accused of witchcraft, condemned to burial outside consecrated ground. Whatever her story, she is said to appear along Rampart's Walk, her gown brushing the grass without a sound. Witnesses describe the air turning icy as she passes. Dogs refuse to enter the churchyard. Candles gutter and die. One gravedigger in the 1920s swore he saw her kneeling by a fresh grave, hands clasped her body, swaying in silent grief. When he spoke, she rose and turned, and there was no face beneath the veil. Inside, the church shadows sometimes move against the stone, even when no one walks there. Organ notes echo faintly. After midnight, a single chord that fades into nothing. Visitors have reported feeling watched from the upper gallery, yet it stands empty and locked. Some say the Grey Lady guards the resting place of a lost child buried long before records began. Others think she is simply the memory of sorrow itself, woven into the stones of Totnes. When the wind rises off the river and rattles the old windows, villagers glance towards St. Mary's and whisper a prayer. For if you see the Grey Lady walking the churchyard path, they say someone in town will soon be laid to rest beside her. King William IV. At the heart of Totnes, among sloping lanes and crooked shop fronts, stands the King William IV, a centuries-old inn where laughter and footsteps once echoed long into the night. Yet beneath its low beams and warm lights, something older still lingers. The story begins with a man known simply as Old Bill, a kindly cook who worked at the inn more than 100 years ago. He was loved for his humor and hearty stews, but one winter's evening he collapsed by the kitchen hearth and never rose again. Ever since, staff say, his spirit has refused to leave the place he called home. When the fires burn low, footsteps sound in the passage between the bar and the kitchen, heavy, deliberate, as if someone were pacing while stirring a pot. Pans clatter, though no one stands nearby, and the scent of roasting meat drifts through empty rooms. Many claim that Bill still watches over the kitchen, ensuring the meals are done properly, just as in life. A visiting musician once told of tuning his guitar near closing time when a chair slid quietly across the floor beside him. Thinking it a prank, he reached out only to find the air freezing cold. Seconds later, the lights above flickered, and a low chuckle rolled through the bar. Guests sleeping in the upper rooms have heard muffled conversation below after the pub had locked up for the night. One swore he heard the sound of a spoon tapping rhythmically on a pot lid, keeping time with a tune only the dead might know. Sometimes bottles tilt from their shelves or roll gently along the counter as though nudged by invisible fingers. Locals say it's harmless mischief, the old cook reminding them he's still on duty. Still on the anniversary of his death, staff leave a tankard of ale and a slice of bread by the hearth. By morning, the glass is often half empty, the crust of bread gone. Whether ghostly caretaker or loyal friend, Old Bill's presence remains part of the inn's charm, a final recipe of warmth, laughter, and lingering mystery stirred forever into the heart of Totnes. Totnes Guildhall. Standing proudly above the cobbled lanes of Totnes, the Guildhall has watched over the town for more than 800 years. Its thick stone walls have heard oaths of allegiance, trials, and sentences passed down through the centuries. Yet when the visitors have gone, and the last echo of footsteps fades, a different kind of presence stirs within. It begins, locals say, with a faint chill. The air grows heavy at the top of the staircase, as if something unseen were watching from the shadows. Then comes the sound, slow, measured footsteps that climb halfway up before stopping abruptly. Staff have checked more than once, expecting to find a late visitor, but the stairs are always empty. The ghost is believed to be that of a former jailer, or perhaps a magistrate who once presided here when the Guildhall served as both court and prison. One tale speaks of a man wrongly accused of theft who cursed the magistrate before being led to the gallows. That night, the official returned home, pale and trembling, saying he'd seen the prisoner's eyes glowing in the darkness behind him. He died within a year, and ever since a restless shadow has been seen in the very spot where the verdict was spoken. A cleaner, working late, once reported hearing keys jangling and the scrape of a chair moving across the council chamber floor. When she turned, the chair sat neatly against the wall, yet fresh dust marks showed where it had slid. Another worker described feeling a hand brush against his shoulder near the magistrate's bench, though he stood entirely alone. Visitors on guided tours sometimes sense a sudden drop in temperature or feel their hearts race without reason as they pass the upper corridor. Some claim they've glimpsed a faint outline of a man dark against the lighter stone, who fades before their eyes. Whether it's guilt, duty, or sorrow that binds him here, no one can say. But each night, as the town sleeps and the moonlight spills through the arched windows, the Guildhall seems to breathe, echoing with the memory of voices' verdicts, and the silent figure who still keeps watch over Totnes. The Waterman's Arms. Beside the quiet curve of the River Dart, where mist rolls low across the fields, stands the Waterman's Arms, a charming riverside inn whose beauty hides a deeply haunted past. At dusk, when the light fades across the water and the creak of the old sign sways in the wind, the building seems to awaken, as if the memories of its former inhabitants are drawn out by the darkness. The current owners speak openly of their ghosts. They tell of Emily, a little girl who is often heard running down the side passage, her laughter echoing faintly through the rafters. Long ago, she is said to have dashed into the road outside the inn, only to be struck by a passing horse and cart. Since then, her small spirit has never left. Staff have reported finding toys moved overnight and a faint jingling of keys when no one is near. Guests sometimes wake to the sound of gentle footsteps, followed by the lightest giggle, as though a child were playing by the bedside. But Emily is not alone. The apparition of a stern-looking woman thought to be a former landlady has been seen in the breakfast room, sitting in her favorite chair, dressed in dark clothing with long gray hair falling over her shoulders. She appears most often in the quiet hours before dawn, simply watching before vanishing without a sound. Some visitors describe an overwhelming sense of sadness when entering the room, while others feel a sudden drop in temperature, as if the air itself mourns her loss. There are tales, too, of cold spots in the cellar where bottles rattle and unseen hands brush against the skin. One late-night guest swore that he saw a door handle slowly turn on its own, followed by a sharp knock though no one else was staying in the inn that night. Locals say that the river remembers all who lived and died along its banks, carrying their stories in the tide. And when the water laps against the stones beneath the waterman's arms, it whispers softly, as if calling to those long gone. Emily, the sorrowful landlady, and perhaps others, still unnamed, lingering forever in the twilight of Devon's haunted waters. St. John the Apostle Church. Among the sloping streets of Torquay, where sea mist drifts in from the bay and gathers around the rooftops, stands St. John the Apostle Church, a handsome Gothic building whose calm exterior hides an unquiet soul. Inside, the air carries the faint scent of candle wax and polished oak. Yet when the wind rises, the church seems to breathe, and a single, sorrowful melody echoes from the pipes of the old organ. The story begins in the late 19th century with Henry Ditton Newman, the church's devoted organist. He was known throughout Torquay for his delicate touch and for the reverence he brought to every hymn. But in 1883, tragedy struck. After a long night of practice, he was found collapsed at the bench, the final chord still humming softly through the air. From that moment, parishioners began to whisper that Henry had never truly left. Over the years, vergers locking up after evening service reported hearing music drifting down from the gallery, a single line of the Te Deum played perfectly, though no one stood at the keys. Others spoke of seeing the shape of a man seated at the organ head, bowed fingers moving in silence. When approached, the figure would fade into the shadows, leaving only the faint shimmer of a chord that no living ear could reproduce. One choirboy once claimed that during rehearsal, the organ burst to life by itself, rolling out a slow, mournful note that filled the church like thunder. The choir master dismissed it as an electrical fault, but when he touched the keys, the instrument was still unpowered. Visitors described the atmosphere as strangely heavy, as if the stone itself absorbs the music and releases it on quiet nights. Some say Henry returns out of duty to ensure his hymns are never forgotten. Others believe his spirit simply seeks the peace that eluded him in life. When the bells toll after dark and the last worshipper has gone, those who pass by St. John's sometimes pause, claiming they can hear the faint rise and fall of unseen fingers upon the keys, the eternal music of a man who refuses to let silence claim his song. The Minerva Inn, in the twisting lanes of Old Plymouth, where salt from the harbour clings to the stone, and the echoes of sailors' songs still drift through the nightstands. The Minerva Inn, a low-beamed tavern that has seen more centuries than most cities have years. It is said to be the oldest public house in Plymouth, and behind its crooked doors, laughter and fear have shared the same seat for generations. By day, the Minerva is warm and lively, filled with the clink of glasses and the hum of conversation. But when the last customer leaves and the lamps are turned low, something ancient begins to stir. The staff speak of cold patches that move through the air like invisible guests of unseen hands that rattle spoons and tug at aprons. Sometimes the jukebox crackles to life with music from no known source, or the sound of footsteps crosses the bar when no one is there. Among the inn's spectral residents is an Elizabethan lady believed to have once kept the house when sailors and smugglers filled its rooms. She is often seen in a pale gown, her face serene, drifting through the corridor toward the back rooms before fading into the shadows. Others speak of a young girl in Victorian dress who peers from the staircase, her eyes filled with sadness. 5 spectral women, thought to have been local prostitutes, have been glimpsed near the bar, whispering softly to one another. The most infamous ghost, however, is Eddie Blake, a smuggler, whose violent end in a brawl left his spirit restless. Patrons have felt a sudden gust of cold air, followed by a growl, or heard an angry man shouting words too muffled to make out. Once, during a quiet evening, a customer screamed as a chair slid violently across the floor on its own. Locals claim that if you linger in the Minerva after midnight, the boundary between the living and the dead begins to blur. The smell of salt and ale thickens, and a sense of unseen eyes fills the room. Some say it's just the sea breeze through the old windows. Others insist the Minerva keeps its past alive, one restless spirit at a time. Smuggler's Haunt Hotel, perched above the harbor of Brixham, where the sea mists curl through the narrow lanes, stands the Smuggler's Haunt Hotel, a creaking Georgian building that wears its history like a shroud. Once a refuge for sailors and traders, it has become known for something far less earthly. Those who stay here speak not only of ocean breezes through old windows, but of presences that never checked out. It is said that the inn's most sorrowful ghost is Agnes, or Aggie, as the locals call her. A young woman who centuries ago fell deeply in love with a sailor. He promised to return from his voyage, but the sea has a cruel habit of keeping what it takes. When word reached her that his ship had gone down in a storm, Aggie climbed to the highest window and threw herself into the cobbled street below. Guests say that on stormy nights, her pale figure is seen staring out from that same window, her dress fluttering, as if caught in a wind only she can feel. Inside, strange happenings are as constant as the tide. Footsteps echo along empty corridors, lights flicker, and television sets switch on, though they are unplugged. Doors open with a slow, deliberate creak, as if welcoming an unseen visitor. In one of the rooms, a wedding dress appears folded in a cupboard, immaculate one day, gone the next. The staff refuse to keep it now, fearing what it might bring with it. Several guests have reported seeing an elderly woman in a rocking chair, gently swaying in the corner of the lounge. She never speaks, only fades when approached. Others mention a man in a cloth cap and long raincoat, always standing near the staircase, staring toward the sea. The current owners claim they have experienced nothing unusual, yet the walls seem to hum with memories. Visitors leave with tales of whispering voices, doors that breathe open in the dark, and sudden, icy drafts that rise from the floorboards. Perhaps in this old house by the harbor, disbelief is just another kind of invitation, and Aggie still waits for the sailor who never came home. Lidwell Chapel, St. Mary's Chapel, hidden deep among tangled hedgerows and lonely fields near Dawlish, lies Lidwell Chapel, or St. Mary's Chapel, now little more than crumbling stone walls, half swallowed by ivy. Few places in Devon carry such a sense of quiet dread. Locals avoid it after dark, whispering that the ground itself remembers what was done here, and by whom. Centuries ago, so the legend goes, the chapel was home to a monk with a black heart. Outwardly, he served God, tending to travelers who sought rest and prayer. But by night, his piety turned to cruelty. He would offer food, wine, and shelter only to murder his guests in their sleep and steal their money. Their bodies were tossed into the well beside the chapel, which would later give the place its grim name, Lidwell, the Well of Corpses. One story tells of a sailor who escaped the monk's treachery. Realizing his danger, he fought back, binding the killer with his own rope and throwing him into the same well where so many others had perished. When the authorities arrived, they found the monk still alive, gibbering in terror and clawing at the stones. It was said that he had been trying to climb out, not from fear of justice, but from what waited below. The bodies of his victims filled the well to the brim. The monk died soon after, his face twisted in horror. Even now, travelers claim to hear weeping and screams drifting across the fields at dusk. The sound seems to rise from the ground itself, as though the dead still cry for release. Some who stand near the ruins have felt the earth tremble faintly beneath their feet, like footsteps pacing below. On still nights, the air around the old well turns unnaturally cold, and animals refuse to cross the clearing. Those who dare to visit on All Hallows' Eve say that a hooded figure appears on the path, the monk himself, forever condemned to wander between his chapel and the pit that became his grave. His punishment, they say, is eternal, to hear the screams of the souls he betrayed echoing through the centuries whenever the wind moves through the broken arch of Lidwell Chapel. The old church house inn. In the quiet village of Torbrian, where mist curls over the hedgerows and the moor presses close, stands the old church house inn, a timbered hostelry said to have offered warmth and ale to travelers since the 14th century. By daylight, it looks every inch the perfect country inn, a low-beamed bar, creaking floors, and the faint scent of oak smoke. But as dusk falls, that same warmth gives way to something older, colder, and far less welcoming. For centuries, guests have spoken of the silent monk who keeps vigil here. He is most often seen seated in the bar, hands folded in prayer, his cowl hiding his face. One winter's night, a weary traveler too tired to climb the stairs fell asleep beside the hearth. He woke to find a monk sitting across from him in the dim glow of the fire. Thinking him another guest, he mumbled a greeting, but the figure did not answer. When he blinked, the monk was gone, the chair still rocking gently as though someone had just risen. Another story tells of a policeman new to the village who entered the inn one evening to meet the locals. He nodded politely to an old man sitting quietly in the corner, only to be told moments later that no one else was there. When he turned back, the seat was empty. The haunting is not confined to the bar. Guests sleeping upstairs have woken to find a tall, bald figure, dressed in black, standing at the foot of their beds. Sometimes it simply stares. Other times it raises one hand, pointing towards the nearby church, before vanishing into the dark. The owners once glimpsed a man leaning over their baby's cot. In panic, they chased him through the house, only to find the doors locked and the rooms empty. Stranger still are the sounds that echo through the night doors, slamming crashes from the kitchen footsteps running along the corridor, and the creak of pews that no longer exist. One visitor swore he saw a disembodied arm stretch out from a doorway, its finger pointing towards the churchyard, as if warning of something unseen beyond. Locals say the monk still watches over both the inn and the church, opposite a guardian perhaps, or a penitent bound to this place for reasons long forgotten. Whatever the truth, few who stay at the old church house inn forget the feeling that someone unseen still moves quietly in the shadows, waiting for the candles to burn low. Cockington Court, hidden among the winding lanes of Torquay, where the air smells faintly of sea salt and the gardens are heavy with roses, stands Cockington Court, a grand country estate with honey-colored walls and long, whispering corridors. By day, it is serene and stately, surrounded by lush lawns and old yew trees. Yet when the light fades, the past returns, and with it, the uneasy sense that unseen eyes are watching from every shadowed window. The most enduring tale is that of the old gatekeeper, a stern man once responsible for securing the estate at dusk. Visitors say he can still be seen at the gates, a stooped figure in a faded coat, stepping forward as if to challenge newcomers. Those who approach often stop midway, for the man simply vanishes before their eyes. Horses have been known to shy at the spot, their riders reporting a sudden chill in the air. Inside the house itself, the atmosphere deepens. A sinister man in 17th century dress has been seen drifting through the great hall and along the staircase. His expression is always grave, his presence accompanied by the faint sound of boots on stone. Staff who have worked late speak of laughter echoing through empty rooms, of chairs shifting position, and the heavy scent of old tobacco lingering in the air long after the building has been locked. Then there are the two ghostly spaniels said to belong to a lady of the house who died centuries ago. They are most often glimpsed near the gardens, running joyfully through the grass before dissolving into mist. Some say the lady herself, veiled in white, has been seen, walking among the trees, her hand trailing along the hedges, as though she still tends her flowers. Even the house's director once admitted that visitors have spoken of glimpses of a white lady in the park and in the house, and that historical accounts describe a laughing cavalier whose portrait once hung in the hall. Whether these are fragments of memory or spirits lingering from another age, no one can be certain. Today, Cockington Court remains both beautiful and unsettling, a place where sunlight and shadow coexist uneasily. Those who walk its paths after dark often pause at the gates, half expecting the old keeper to appear stepping forward from the gloom with a silent nod, as though time itself has stopped and the living have strayed for a moment into his world. From Dartmoor's windswept ruins to the haunted lanes of Totnes, Devon's ghosts still linger in shadow and story. If you've enjoyed this journey into the unknown, subscribe to Creepy Experience for more haunted history.